up the blue pen and say, I should use this pen because my signature will stand out more, but then you notice the black pen had a felt tip, and he kind of likes signing with felt tip markers, and you go on and on like this for 30 minutes. You can imagine how tedious it must have been to listen to someone debate the merits of blue pens versus black pens. It would take Elliot 6 hours to try to figure out where to eat lunch, and then the restaurant would be closed, and he'd still be hungry. So all the everyday decisions that we take for granted, these banal, mundane, tedious decisions, Elliot was incapable of making. This is one of the first pieces of evidence that our emotions aren't just these things that lead us astray. They're not just these wild horses, but they actually underlie human cognition in general. That pure reason, the thing we'd been aspiring to for millennia, ever since Plato, that pure reason wasn't this great gift from the gods, that pure reason was actually a disease. And I'd like to illustrate this point just quickly with a little audience participation, because I think this has big implications. I'm going to focus briefly on the big implications in terms of moral decision-making and how this shapes what people feel is essential, important, and worth giving money to. So I'd like to begin first with a slightly dramatic thought puzzle. It's called the trolley scenario. It was invented by philosophers about 20 years ago. And in the first condition, this is condition A, you're the driver of a trolley, and you're barreling down the tracks. And you suddenly realize that you've lost the ability to brake. You see 5 workers working on the tracks right ahead of you, and you realize that you're going to run them over. They've got nowhere to go. 5 people are about to die. They're about to be killed by the trolley you're driving. Then you notice that you can just turn the wheel a little bit to the right and you'll veer onto another track where there's only 1 worker. So who would turn the wheel to the right? You got 5 workers dead ahead that you'll run over if you don't turn the wheel. And if you do turn the wheel, you'll kill 1 poor guy, but what can you do? So who would turn the wheel? Raise your hand if you would turn the wheel to the right. So I'll estimate that's a majority of people would turn the wheel. And what you find when you ask this question all over the world, that 96% of people say, of course I would turn the wheel. That's simple arithmetic, right? The poor schmuck on the other track, what can you do? But it's better to kill 1 person than kill 5. It's just simple math. So here's the other scenario. So now you're standing on a footbridge overlooking the trolley tracks, and you see a runaway trolley, and it's barreling down these tracks, and there are 5 workers on the track, and you realize that these 5 workers don't see the train coming. They're about to be run over. It's going to be gruesome, and you're going to watch it happen. And then you look to your right and you see a very large man leaning over the footbridge just above the trolley tracks. And it suddenly occurs to you that you could push this man onto the trolley tracks, and he's so fat that he would stop the train and save the 5 men. So now a show of hands, who would push the man onto the tracks? So no one's going to raise their hand? It's probably good because this is actually a question used in tests of psychopaths. So it's good we didn't see too many hands there. But what you find when you ask this question all over the world is that you get a complete reversal. So now 95% of people say, gosh, I couldn't push a man with my own hands onto the tracks. That's not moral. That's murder. That's a horrible thing to do. And yet, of course, if you were Kant, you would see, if you were, an ethical philosopher who thought, moral decisions were rational decisions, you would really see no fundamental difference, right? The numbers haven't changed. It's still 5 versus 1. It's the same basic calculus. And yet, from the perspective of our brain, it feels completely different. That emotion behind the decision has changed. So in one case, it's virtuous to turn the trolley wheel. In another case, it is murder. It's a grave sin to push a man onto the trolley tracks. Here's another thought puzzle. This is by Jonathan Haidt at the University of Virginia, and he gives this to his undergraduates. And he tells a story about Jack and Jill, their brother and sister, got a great sibling relationship, and they're vacationing together in Provence, and they're having a really wonderful time together. And then, one night they drink a little wine and they decide to have sex. Sibling sex. Is this wrong? Who thinks it's wrong? So most people think it's wrong, and not surprisingly, Jonathan Haidt's undergraduates also say, gosh, yeah, of course that's wrong. It says, well, why is it wrong? And the first answer from the vast majority of people is, it's wrong because they might have a kid with birth defects. That's clearly a sign that siblings shouldn't have sex. And to what Jonathan says, oh, excellent point. But you know what? They use 2 forms of birth control, so that's not an issue. Is it still wrong? And they say, of course it's still wrong. It says, well, why? And they say, well, because it's going to ruin their sibling relationship. To which Jonathan says, oh, another smart point, but don't worry about that. Again, they had sex once. It was a great experience. It brought them closer together than ever before. But they decided, they're never going to do it again. But the relationship's great. Is it still wrong? And so they go on and on like this. They come up with one reason after another, and he shoots them all down. And then at the end, they've run out of reasons, and they reach a state of what he calls moral confounding, and he says, well, is it still wrong? And they say, yes, it's still wrong. It just is. And what that illustrates, he argues, is that morality is a lot like aesthetics, that some things just feel wrong to us. And we invent lots of reasons to explain why they're wrong. We rationalize these feelings. We rationalize these moral instincts. But in the end, what's behind it all is this inexplicable emotion we can't begin to explain. That in the same way you walk up to a painting and as soon as you see it that it's beautiful or it's not beautiful to you. That it's an inexplicable perception, it's an inexplicable feeling, that morality isn't so different. And I think there's actually some really interesting evidence linking this sense of morality as an emotion, as a fundamentally emotional process, to a study that came out just last week on, there's a very simple experiment. People simply took brain scans of people as they were giving away money. So these experiments, there have been a couple of them, they all follow a similar protocol. You give undergraduates $100 of cash and you say, here are all these nonprofits you can give money to, and then you watch what happens in their brain as they give away money. And you also make it clear that they can keep the money too, they don't have to give it away. So whatever money they don't give away, they're actually left in their pocket and they walk out with, $25. And so then you watch what happens in the brain as people give money away. And I was talking to one of the scientists at Caltech who just did this experiment, and he said, we compared the brain scans of these people giving away money to an experiment they'd done the year before that looked at how people choose what to eat. And to their astonishment, there were virtually no differences between the brain scans of people giving away money and the brain scans of people choosing between, a Snickers bar or a payday bar. And on the one hand, that's kind of underwhelming in a sense, that we use the same crude machinery to make altruistic moral decisions and to make decisions about sugar and chocolate and peanut butter. But what they argue, and of course this comes with the usual caveats of this also tells us something about how crude brain scanning technology is, that we really don't see too many differences. But what they argue, the underlying point is that we use the same mental processes to make all these decisions, to choose between foods and choose between nonprofits, to choose where to give our money away to and choose where to spend our money on hedonistic treats. That the point is, what our emotions are really doing is making calculations of value. And this gets us back to Damasio and why they're so essential for choosing between pens and what kind of sandwich you want to eat for lunch and who you want to marry and every decision you make all day, every day. That what your emotions are really doing is they're acting like a neural currency. That they're sifting through the world through this blooming, buzzing confusion of stimuli and saying, what, option A is more valuable to you than option B, that you prefer Honey Nut Cheerios to multigrain Cheerios. And so all those subtle feelings that, as Damasio found, are so essential. And when you're denied them, you can't make any decision at all. You're stuck in the state of pathological indecision. That the reason they're so essential is because they're telling you what you value in the world, whether or not you believe this nonprofit is more valuable than this nonprofit, and so it's more deserving of your cold hard cash. That so many of these decisions that we've assumed are rational in a sense, that we've assumed we're maximizing utility and really being deliberate about them, that they're actually not rational at all, that they're in a sense grounded in these deeply inexplicable instincts. Now, I don't want to give you the impression, though, that the secret to making good decisions across all these different domains is to simply listen to your emotions, to blink and trust your gut, because, that would be terrible advice, too. As we all know, our emotions sometimes lead us astray. They lead us to eat too much ice cream and take out those subprime mortgages and watch the Jersey Shore telethon. So clearly our emotions aren't omniscient either. And I'm not going to waste too much time, listing all the ways